Welcome to Innovation in Government. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today, Nicholas Spiess, the Chief Federal Technologist at Snowflake. Nicholas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. The growth of artificial intelligence and machine learning over the last few years is unmistakable. Agencies have realized the potential and real benefits of using advanced technologies to improve decision-making, analyze large databases, and address mission challenges. Bloomberg Government estimates agencies are on track to spend about $5 billion on total AI investments this year alone. The initial use cases and successes are driving even more investments. For instance, the National Science Foundation requested more than $850 million in AI-related research and development funding in fiscal 2021. That's about a 70% increase above its fiscal 2020 request. The Defense Department's 2021 budget request also would boost the Joint AI Center's funding from $242 million to $290 million. And DoD is asking for another $449 million for AI-related projects for the Defense Advanced Research Projects, or DARPA. All this spending doesn't necessarily translate into long-term successes. That's why the administration and GSA created the AI Community of Practice. It launched in November and now has more than 400 members from 26 agencies. The goal is very simple: help agencies find and apply best practices and examples where agencies have successfully deployed AI for customer experience, human resources, advanced cybersecurity, and business purposes. So how can agencies continue to make this progress? How are these common mistakes that they should avoid? Well, that's where our guest comes in. Nicholas Spiess, the Chief Technologist at Snowflake, will help us understand how agencies can build on these early AI and machine learning successes. So we've talked a lot about AI. You can see the budget. It's very exciting, but is there substance behind all this buzz?
Absolutely. The numbers we see across all the agencies you just listed should be a prime indicator that this stuff is real. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, the opportunity there for us and across all industries, not just in government, is substantial. Not necessarily replacing what we do today, but doing it in a smarter way. A lot of the folks in the cloud industry, a lot of folks in data industry say that being data-driven is the best way to make decisions. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is how we feed that.
I think you make an interesting point, that the data-driven piece. Everyone says you got to use data to make better decisions, but it's how do you get there? And there's a lot of tools and a lot of, if you will, emphasis on, okay, what are the right tools, what were the wrong tools? So give me a sense, as we talk about using data, where does AI play in that? I mean, it's the underlying what?
Sure. We've actually in the industry been building this architecture for decades. We've built it with Hadoop. We built it with shared nothing architectures. We built it before that with our first initial cloud offerings. Where we're at now is using machine learning to control situations where there's a lot of variables. For example, think about in the medical community trying to figure out for a certain individual what conflicts of different prescriptions they might have. Those conflicts across any number of variables, demographic, health, weight, all of those things are important factors, or could be important factors for that individual. Being able to look at all of those variables in a very quick way and serve out recommendations to pharmacists is just one example of a great way of using machine learning and artificial intelligence.
The variable piece, I think, is why there's so much exciting about it. Before, you or someone like yourself who's an engineer would have to say, okay, how do I develop a piece of software that can at least look at some of this? Or how do I have to look at all these audit logs if you're talking about cybersecurity? Is that the driving factor here? Is that, wow, look how much quicker we can move?
It is part of it. So a lot of companies in the industry have built basic tool sets or the building blocks of those architectures. So you look at technology companies, cloud data companies like Snowflake, you look at some of the middleware like DataRobot or UiPath. These companies are getting better at building commercial off-the-shelf offerings that can be that foundation that we build these offerings on top of. So agencies and organizations are left to just build that top 30% that's specific to their mission and really get that value out, one, for less cost, but two, also in a more catered, more effective way.
When you say more catered, more effective way, meaning more specific to the mission area, instead of just saying, well, we have a tool that can look at data. We can say, no, we have a tool that looks at data for waste, fraud, and abuse, or a tool that looks at data for comparing medical problems of veterans, I mean, as an example.
Absolutely. Our brains are wired differently, so must our AI and ML infrastructures.
A lot of agencies are going down this path. As you heard, the spending is huge, over $1 billion in the civilian sector alone. DoD has several hundred million as well. What goes into a successful AI project? What are some of those key factors we should keep in mind?
So again, it's going back to those foundational pieces. It's a best practice these days to maximize the use of as much open source or commercially available software as you possibly can.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you. Open source
Please.
or commercial available, those seem to be two different things. I'm thinking proprietary, I'm thinking I got to buy the piece from Snowflake and I got to buy the piece from somebody else and I got to somehow hopefully integrate. We're talking about open source and open standards?
Open source and open standards, yes,
Put
absolutely.
you on the spot there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where the IT world is going. If we think about what we as engineers used to do 10 years ago, we talked about the speed of spinning disk, the speed of our network connections. Now we talk about what APIs are available. How does data move from place to place and how do we handle that better? That's sort of the evolution of that. Open source and open standards, open interfaces, that's really the answer.
So we start with those foundational pieces, but agencies also need to understand like what goes into it. It's not just the tools, it's the other pieces and parts. So as you work with your federal customers, what are you seeing, okay, this makes it successful or this doesn't make it successful? Give me some of those things that you're seeing from your federal customers.
Sure, successful, unsuccessful, I would say a challenge in that arena we'll start with security. That's always a challenge, especially in the federal government. The data that they collect can be sensitive in a lot of different ways. Another challenge and sort of shortfall that we see a lot of folks do is over-rotating on custom software and tool sets. I'll keep repeating it over and over again because it's a relevant point we've seen over and over. If you try to take on too much and build too much customization, like any monolithic system of the past 40 years, it's a huge challenge to maintain and to optimize over time. This is really where Agile and DevOps comes into its own, being able to very quickly pivot on a capability you want to explore further.
I think that's a great piece of advice around Agile and DevOps. Agencies are starting to move there, but they have this tendency to, I'll use the term you said, over-rotate, try to put too much into one, oh, well, we need this piece of software, and that software will be able to do these 20 things. No, just do one thing and then build upon that one thing. And is those the conversations are you starting to have with customers?
Absolutely. It's again, technologies like us, cloud data warehouses, we have open standards, ODBC, JDBC, stuff everyone has used in the past. We're not the only ones in that game. Making data go from there into a cloud AI platform or a cloud ML platform, it's just a matter of wiring up the right things, building the right technology pieces in place, and we stress to folks, use that, the capabilities inherent to those products, meet with vendors, meet with open source technologists, meet with those folks at their conferences.
We hit upon security, we'll probably come back around to that. Let me ask you, are there other, when you look at agencies and as they're going forward with AI, ML projects, are there other success factors that are outside of this technology? Is it a top-down leadership type of discussion? I mean, it always is to a certain extent, but it also sometimes it's a bottom-up where people get excited about using the technology and they just have to have the runway to try something out.
Absolutely. I hate to use buzzwords, but culture's repeated over and over again in these discussions, and for good reason. I think when it comes to the culture of the machine learning and AI side, it's a couple of different perceptions. One, that everything's going to take my job. That's the first, and we can go back to that too. The bigger relevant thing there is, what is this really going to do for my agency, and how can I work alongside these tools, and how can I leverage those tools to be better at what I'm doing in my profession? And that starts at the bottom end. At the top end, it's setting the right expectations and building the right architecture so that folks don't feel cornered or that the tool is more enabled than they are. And I'll give you an example there. We've seen a lot of times where a machine learning algorithm is given access to auditing data or billing data that even their own auditors at an organization were not given access to. That's kind of a backwards way of doing it and not how we want to do business in the future.
You mentioned the backwards way. Let's jump into mistakes. Are there common mistakes you're seeing now? I think that was a good one. You brought up the fact is, wait a minute, you're giving the machine access to data that I can't even get access to. Obviously, that's going to cause some cultural problems in and of itself, but what are the mistakes?
So I think the migration from on-prem to cloud, we talk about AI and ML, we also talk about IT modernization at the same time. Those things are going on in parallel in the industry. IT modernization, moving from an on-premise environment into a cloud environment, that migration is key to how the outcome of AI and ML is going to work for your organization. So moving that data, moving those applications, moving those structures into the cloud in a good way, and I'll be clear about that. If you move the silo from on-prem to the cloud, you haven't fixed any problems. Somebody else's computer is the joke we used to make about the cloud 5-10 years ago, because we took virtual machines that were running on our environment and we moved them out to the cloud and didn't recognize savings or efficiencies. Same thing with our data, same thing with our modern applications. We have to move to cloud smartly, which will enable AI and ML and will also help the culture change. Siloed data means siloed workers.
And I think it's a great point you bring up, that if you're just lifting and shifting into the cloud, you still have whatever reason it didn't work before is not going to work now. Is there, to break down those silos, this is again, go back to the culture change. Are you seeing mistakes or successes of how to break down those silos, so you're not just picking up the on-prem and putting it in the cloud and then still having the same challenges?
Sure, so we have to start by admitting that we don't know what we don't know. How our agency, we're very good at generating data. We're, I think, mostly bad at deciding how we generate that data. What do we do Monday at 5 o'clock to get that data to be in the system on Tuesday? So gathering, lack of a better term, metadata about how we work in our organization can give us more data points to make refinements to that process, which will then improve everything in our systems.
It also opened the door for the connection to understanding why your silo, you need to break out of your silo. Oh, I didn't realize that the finance side used my HR data, or vice versa. And now that I see that because of this AI tool that we came together around, I have a better understanding of not just your mission, but of how you're using my data, why my data is important to you. I think that's another piece that sometimes gets lost.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's true across every organization and every department. No department of a company should, I'm sure some do, but none should work in a complete vacuum. That collaboration between departments happens all the time. It's
also probably a big success factor when you talk about how to get people to accept AI tools and ML tools. If you bring people together around the tool, around a working group that says, okay, here's what we're trying to achieve, and here's the tool we want to use, or a set of tools we want to use. It's not so much, well, that's what you're doing and I'm not a part of it. It's we're part of this together and we'll move forward together, and then the benefits kind of rise and you get acceptance.
Absolutely. Don't let this be a black box in your organization. Don't try to personify it and name it, right? It's a process, it's a tool, it informs how your organization or your agency does business. Treat it as such. Be transparent about what it's doing and how it makes its decisions, and take feedback from every level on how it could do it better.
The key word you didn't quite say, but I'll fill in the blank here.
Appreciate that.
Trust and transparency. And I think that's
absolutely
what we hear time and again when I talk to CIOs and others who are trying to move into this AI world is we have to establish those two things, trust and transparency, both internally but also with citizens. And there's a citizen side to this too, as agencies use more AI and ML tools. What do you hear from them on citizens, the external?
Sure, a lot of times folks don't want their data to be used in ways that they don't understand. They don't want that data to go to places that they haven't approved of. That's getting hotter every year, maybe even every day. So again, transparency from the organization back to the citizenship on how that is done. I think we've done some great work with the federal data strategy on the federal side. Most states are also sort of echoing a lot of those sentiments to be transparent about how data is used and how it's arranged in the federal government. I think those are all great initiatives.
One of the big deals about the trust is if you understand not just where the data is going, where it came from and how it's being used, but what the outcome is, I think you also can establish that longer term, okay, well, they used it, things got better, the service I got was better, the outcome was better, and I think that plays a big role too.
Absolutely.
Let's take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Caresoft on Federal News Network.